interception to me. CJ, thoughts?
No, I completely agree. I mean, there's not much information to go off of, but what I would ask, perhaps you know a bit more than I do. Some people are already claiming that this is the new long-range Ukrainian loitering munition in action. To that, I say, I don't think it was probably designed to fly that high. That interception looks like something trying to intercept a missile or a plane, not necessarily a loitering munition drone. So I was hoping if you had any sort of the specifications or just generally if this loitering munition is supposed to fly high or low. Again, I'm assuming low, if that's any chance of what it could be.
Yeah, I have no idea. I've already seen people speculating on that. I have not seen any technical specifications of what this thing is gonna look like, what its capabilities are gonna be. That's definitely a John question. He might have more information on that. But yeah, I mean, I put the picture up in the nest so people can see what this looks like. It is fairly high up in the air, so I'm not sure. But I think suggesting that this is the new loitering munition that Ukraine's developing seems a little bit premature. But time will tell, I guess.
Seems a bit of a short-range kind of use of it, but shall we go a little bit into it? But before we go into news of this loitering munition being tested, some people are asking me, what was it that hit that Camo 52? That alligator turned it into a handbag. Is it right that it's an S300, or could it be something else still?
I don't think that was an S300 interception.
Blast and so.
Yeah, I don't think that was an S300. Like the video wasn't too clear. I couldn't really make out any incoming projectiles, but that would be hard with anything that's going really fast. But it didn't seem like a super large explosion. I mean, you can hit a helicopter with an S300 interceptor, but I think it's more likely that it was probably a shorter range surface-to-air missile, Manpad, or some other SHORAD system.
And also, too, I mean, yeah, I think the more common sense answer would be probably a Igla or a Stinger. And I think if you look at just the preliminary explosion, I try to zoom in as much as you can, it does look like the missile comes from below, which would seem to suggest that it was a Manpad as opposed to a larger interceptor. Also, the explosion is not very large as well, so that would lend more evidence, I think, or credence to the idea that it probably was just a shoulder-fired rocket. But yeah, still no reason why that Ka-52 was flying so high. That there's really no excuse for that.
So some sort of a land-based air defense system, probably not S-300, but probably not a Manpad.
No, Manpad's definitely possible. I would say Manpad or other short-range system, whether that be one of the Soviet pattern systems that Ukraine has, or one of the Western systems that's been provided, Mistral, surface-to-air missile, or Krotal, things of that nature.
Charles?
Yeah, I had a question about this video with the helicopter, and then I think yesterday there was a fixed wing shoot down. I don't remember if it was a Sukhoi or what it was. But I guess my question is sort of Colby or CJ, if you guys knew anything regarding whether the Russians had changed the way that they're using close air support. Are they becoming a little less risk averse than they were in the past?
So I started about an hour ago, but now that we've got more military people here, you're welcome to push back. I think it's less a function that they're more risk adverse now, more so due to the fact that they have so much less of an artillery rate of fire. They have to make the gap up on the ground for the effects to achieve some sort of level of success, or just effective cover, suppression really would be the more accurate term for their guys. And so what that means is they're using aircraft more because they have so fewer, artillery rounds to send. A decrease from 60,000 a day to 20,000 a day that's a gigantic gap that you can't make up with just a couple loitering munitions here and there. You need a significant amount of firepower to make up for it, especially when you're still trying to go on the offense. So I think that's probably what's causing more Russian aircraft to come to the front and then therefore get shot down more.
Okay, thanks. But I mean, there would. I mean, I'm just kind of doing basic common sense logic here, but there'd be no way that they could replace tens of thousands of rounds with close air support. I mean, they don't have that level of capability, do they?
No, no way. And especially since their doctrine really doesn't have a good analogy for close air support at all. It is quite different. So yes, no, you're exactly right. It's not going to make up the gaps based on their artillery heavy doctrine by just using aircraft in there. So it's it might help a little bit more so than probably drones would, but not enough, I would say.
I agree with CJ, and obviously, Charles, you made this point last night when we were talking that Russia really can't afford to reduce their artillery fires anymore because that's going to have pretty adverse tactical effects on the situation on the front line. They're using artillery to keep the Ukrainian forces suppressed as much as they can, and in the absence of that, Ukraine's going to have a lot more freedom of maneuver to potentially engage in more local counterattacks. And I think that with their own artillery issues, they're resorting to more air sorties, both fixed and rotary wing, to try and maintain some sort of pressure on Ukrainian forces, even though obviously that can't at all replace the amount of fires they're going to put down with tube artillery. You got to make do with what you got. So they're using their air assets, whereas previously they might have been more hesitant to risk them because they are so vulnerable to being shot down, given the complex threat environment that they're operating in. So I would second CJ's opinion on that. It was reported, I think it was at SU-34 that was claimed to have been shot down. I don't know if that was definitively confirmed or not, but that was claimed the other day that they had downed one of those.
All of this brings us back to the maintenance issue of the heavily utilized tube artillery on the Russian side, and whether their second and third level maintenance capacity close enough to the front line is actually there, and whether they can keep this up logistically, and whether Ukraine can hit those logistic spots.
Mic check.
I'm here. I was just waiting for CJ to consider this.
Oh, okay.
Oh, well, I was just going to add on here. I was looking at a pretty incredible video, Axel, and we talk about misapportioning supplies and logistics, and it's a video of a Grad rocket or some other much larger missile fired from the Russian side to hit a single Ukrainian position. And we hear this all the time, that there is basically Russian units that are still effective at using their artillery, but they're using them to basically almost seem like settle personal scores, where they're firing at just groups of 1 or 2 Ukrainian soldiers. And let me tell you, that's not anyone's doctrine for how to use those systems. So no wonder they're doing so bad or running so low on ammo.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that one, CJ. That it looks like a Grad impact fuse on a trench. It seemed like a very odd use. Is that right?
Odd for us, perhaps, but for Russia, it seems to be pretty normal these days.
Maybe to come back to Axel's question, I had a similar question regarding tube maintenance. I'm sure you've probably answered this in the question in the past, but you know, if you're taking a towed artillery, say we'll just take a 777 for example, and you need to, I don't know, rework the tube. I don't know what exactly you'd call it. You know, once you've reached a certain number of rounds, you know, what does that actually entail? Is it you need a whole new barrel? Do you just need to replace certain parts on the breech? How long does that take? What kind of machinery is needed to actually redo those things?
So again, so maybe you want to add a little bit of this to this discussion, Charles, but this is the thing. This is all done by civilians. The military takes really no part in this process as a pullover gauge. We do pullover gauge readings and other low levels of maintenance, but that level 10 maintenance is not touched by the military anymore. And so it creates a situation where you need civilian contractors to do all of these sort of very maintenance and heavy jobs, which, it's difficult to get civilians into a war zone. Basically, long story short, it's going to depend on the type of damage or type of tube wear that's been done. But what's happened at the point of when it needs to change over is the barrel is now a couple millimeters larger than when it started. And so gas is escaping on either side of the round when it goes out. So it's going out much slower, which means it's shooting not as far. And so it doesn't necessarily get to the point where it's going to break or burst, since the inside is chrome, there's titanium and other metals, alloys mixed in there. So it's not going to just explode apart like it would have 200, 300 years ago, but it's going to just keep growing in size until it's effectively just so inaccurate. It's kind of a guess where it's going to land, but all that's handled by the civilian side. So it's up to contractors to figure that part out, and maybe that's not the right answer moving forward.
Okay, yeah.
What do we actually know? I'm sorry, apologies for interjecting. Charles, you can go on right after. But what do we actually know currently? Because I've tried to read up on this, and I asked a few people, and there were very scarce, if not mumbling, answers as to what level of maintenance capacity the Russian forces, respectively the engineering corps, respectively any kind of civilian contractors which they have subordinated and delegated there, actually have at hand. I mean, the space is large. They can't transport all this kit back to Krasnodar or to Rostov-na-Don easily. I mean, there must be a significant challenge both to their accuracy, as you just said, and reach, which probably fits with what we know from Bakhmut. But at the same time, this is a very inefficient and very ineffective process. It would be good to know this a bit better. Is there no data?
Well, all I can tell you is what AWG put together, or the Asymmetric Warfare Group, which used to be a part of the U.S. Army Trade Auction, and they spent 4 or 5 years in Ukraine studying this very question very closely from Ukrainian trenches, watching the Russians. And as far as they could tell, there was nothing, right? There was no real good data, because I don't think the Russians, based on their planning, we know there's actions and there's words. So the actions that they've taken are, on paper, they have no combat service support, or basically people that can maintain these things in their frontline units, in BTGs or even in regiments. So it means they're further back in the line, but that's what they actually task organize their troops. What they actually do might be even further back to the rear. My general thought, of course, from what limited I know about Russian doctrine, is they probably don't really have a good plan for maintaining those types of things, because they're relying so much on sheer quantity that the quality of those systems over time they anticipate will deteriorate. So I'd have to imagine if they're actually getting maintainers closer to the fight, it's going against their doctrine to become better in this sort of longer war where they have to rely just on the systems they have, because they have so much trouble now producing new things that they're actually probably improving their doctrine throughout this. But as far as I know, no real indication. For example, they had about 12,000 artillery pieces at the start of the war. They've had in theater anywhere between 6,000 and 8,000 of these guns at a time. So they can they have enough extra, 4,000 or 5,000, that they can just bring a gun in to replace a whole group, of guns. And they don't really have any problems keeping enough in the fight. But, over time that adds up, I think.
So this comes back to General Hodges' remark that the ATACMS are absolutely crucial to hit the logistics lines, nodes, supply depots, and hit deep into Russian territory to make sure that none of the assembly points for any of these artillery pieces are safe.
Yes, and I just putting the finishing touches on this tweet of this Ukrainian artillery interview with one of the key planners, and he talks about this very much so. He doesn't necessarily make a plea for ATACMS, but what he says is, the HIMARS allows and enables and creates the space and time and physical space to keep those thousands of Russian guns away from their Russian sources of production. Even though it's only 80 kilometers, that's a lot to cross, through rough terrain with limited trucks. So when ATACMS happens, if you think that sort of space that exists in between the production, which Ukraine will never be able to stop, but with the guns that we'll be able to stop will be so much larger that it creates a situation where if, pushing ammo depots from 20 kilometers to the front to 100 kilometers dropped artillery down from 60,000 rounds a day to 20,000 rounds a day, what will pushing back the ammo depots 300 kilometers do? Will it cut it in a third again? At that point in time, Russia will have 6,000 guns that can only fire 1 round a day, and Ukraine will actually be out shooting them.
Great, thanks a lot, CJ. I think we should say hello to Sarah, who's come up to the speaker panel, and unfortunately, looks like Doma's got a case of the Twitter pox. But hello, Sarah.
Charles, I can put you up to calls if you like.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for calling over to me. I was speaking with Yehuda earlier, and I'm currently, for the first time in 275 days, outside of Ukraine. I am in Poland, preparing to leave for the United States, and I wanted to take just some questions regarding the trip to the U.S. and maybe answer some questions and give you guys a little sneak preview of what to expect. And that's why I jumped in. I'll be here for maybe about 45 minutes to an hour, available to talk about the situation of what we're looking at in the coming week in DC.
Great,
Bonsoir,
thank you.
Sarah.
Go ahead, Axel. You want to kick it off?
No, I was just saying good evening from Tallinn, because Sarah arrived at a point in time that I was just about to grab myself a decent beer. But given the fact that she knows Tallinn very well, I'm very glad to welcome her back. Good to have you.
Thank you very much, Axel, and I'm glad to, I'm glad to have come to a country where the support for Ukraine, even though it was a very solemn day with Poland losing 3-1 in the World Cup, the support for Ukraine is as strong as ever. I saw it in the trains, I saw it in the town, and it's just great to know that there's such incredible allies in both the Baltics, where you are right now currently, and of course in the former Warsaw Pact countries.
So I imagine you'll be underway for the next day or two on your way back to Washington, D.C. Thanks so much for coming by. CJ, you have a question?
Yeah, Sarah, thank you so much for coming. I guess I'll offer up, would you like a hardball first or a softball first? Because I'm always full of some questions here.
No, go for it, CJ. Feel free to throw them out of whichever way they pop into your mind.
Okay, we'll ease into it here, because I think it's you're doing incredible work, obviously, in Ukraine, and as a spokesperson, for the whole country, coming back to America, it'll be a great endeavor. So I guess first off, what do you hope to accomplish with your time in DC? What kind of outcome would you like to achieve, do you think, when it's all said and done?
That's the important question, and there's not one answer to it. There's several distinct answers, and I'm speaking to people from both the congressional branch and from the executive branch. The executive branch is going to be State Department, and the congressional branch is going to be a variety of groups. When it comes to the overarching message, it's going to be twofold. Number one, don't forget the war. It's going to be as simple as that. The timing was chosen not only because of the lame duck session, but also due to the fact that coming into the holiday season where things are slowing down, and we know the war is continuing, but a lot of people, when I say slowing down, I mean slowing down on the front, in the sense of the big gains that were being made. It's the bloodiest time of the conflict, yet we are seeing incremental gains on both sides in this swaying of back and forth when it comes to the land underneath our feet. And so that's not sexy to the Western media, especially in the United States. And with the holidays, it's even a slower time. And I'm hoping to get in front of enough lawmakers that when they go home to their districts, they say, I just spoke to someone who brought us 9 months worth of experience from a multitude of different perspectives, from journalism, from enlistment, and just from being there on the ground. And I want people talking about it in their districts. I want congressional staffers talking about it to their friends. I want the elected representatives to be talking about it. And ultimately, I want folks to have to think about their discussions with me throughout the holidays as we come into the 2023 congressional session. on a more micro sense. So that's the macro. From a micro level, I want them to also think about, you were just talking about attack, or you weren't, but meaning the room was talking about ATACMS and HIMARS. I want them thinking about what else is needed to help supplement our military actions. I need armored ambulances. I need blood transfusion kits. I need field hospital gear. I need the things that will keep our guys alive in order for us not to have to go through the entire logistical sense of re-equipping, retraining, remobilizing, re-recruiting new soldiers all the time to make up for our KIAs and wounded in actions. And the United States and NATO countries could go a long way towards making certain that we're not having the casualty rate that we are by getting us these instruments that can prevent death. And so that's going to be on the more focused and micro scale. So the macro is don't stop talking about this. The micro is going to be direct lobbying for ancillary combat equipment specifically focused in the medical field, because every life we save is a life closer to victory.
That's great. I think we're all together in the right place then, because both things are just so important. So for, if I may, Axel, to ask a little bit more of a difficult question, you know, I was reading through the Key of Independence, sort of new, I don't know, expose. I don't know the right way to describe it. Kind of talking about some of the controversies with Western weapons. Often in the space, we talk very often about how effective they are, how a lot of countries are giving, you know, a decent amount, but a lot could be doing a lot more. I guess, could you sort of give us, you know, the ground perspective from your time in Ukraine? How has corruption or military effectiveness and sort of the use of those Western weapons improved, changed, or, you know, kind of gone about through the course of the war? Because I think the picture they're painting is somewhat negative, but I know a lot of things have changed for the better. So hopefully you could speak to that a little bit.
So I read the article. I've read, there's 3 major articles that have come out regarding the Legion. The first was a Kyiv Independent article. The second was an article written by a great Canadian journalist by the name of Mark McKinnon, who has really been incredible when it comes to his coverage of Ukraine. But he had an extremely, critical look at maybe some of the behaviors going on in the Legion, and then obviously the newest one that came out, the Kyiv Independent. 3 days prior to the Kyiv Independent story coming out on corruption, I wrote a story that was published in the new media site by the founders of the Lincoln Project, which basically refuted the notion of wide-scale corruption when it came to weapons aid. And I ended it, of course, with permission of the ministry. I ended it inviting those in Washington to come to Ukraine, come say hello, Ukraine, that we would give them armed escorts to the warehouses where the weapons are stored. We would give them armed escorts to the front lines where the weapons are being used. And of course, they would have access to all the databases showing where the weapons have come in from and where they were dispersed to. So on the large scale, we don't have corruption when it comes to the weapons that are being donated that are in the headlines. We are a 500,000-600,000 person army. Maybe 50 M4s went missing. I have to say that because I'm not in the Legion, I can't speak for it. However, it didn't seem as though it was that outrageous, some of the claims that were made by both named sources and unnamed sources. The key takeaway from that story is that no one claimed the weapons were being sold on the black market to people either outside the war effort or on the other side of the war. I will quote our defense minister, and I quoted him in my paper article that I wrote the other day. If anyone is engaging in black market weapon sales, it's the Russians themselves, as they're sending weapons down to Syria and to African warlords and everyone else. And so the key takeaway from the Kyiv Independence story is, sure, there was a misplacement of some small arms. I believe it. I believe small arms were misplaced. No indication and no allegations that the weapons were sold on the black market or being utilized in any way but for the betterment of Ukraine. And if there were crimes committed I'm certain that the state security services, as well as internal investigations from within the armed forces of Ukraine, will come to the proper answers. One reason Ukraine is in position to fight for liberty and democracy is because the rule of law here has strengthened so considerably over the last half decade. I wasn't here in 2014, but I've been following Ukraine closely since 2004 with the first revolution. And every revolution, every issue brought Ukrainians closer to becoming this epitome of freedom and this beacon of light of democracy. And I think that we're going to see both currently and in rebuilding that the rule of law is firmly entrenched. And so those who are accused in the article in the Legion will either face justice or be exonerated, one of the two. And I think we can all be confident of that. But I'll wrap it up by saying there is zero corruption when it comes to the large weapons systems being sent over by the United States and our Western allies.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think the main article started with the loss of a clue, and for people that don't know, that's part of a javelin that many people take off to use for its thermal imaging. So I wonder if people understand how NATO militaries work, and I can assure them as a 10-year member of a NATO military, Ukrainians, nothing I've heard has sounded out of place or anywhere near what I would consider bad. Just when you have that many people operating in such a tough fight, things are going to happen, but nothing seemingly out of the ordinary. So thank you, Sarah, for that answer.
And I don't mind the hard questions, because ultimately, CJ, they have to be asked. And again, if something is out of the ordinary, the United States is going to put an end to it. You guys remember how hard it was just to get the first weapon systems over here in March? Everyone was vetted at the highest levels to make certain that the people who were receiving these are going to be responsible. And they've been responsible so far.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Let's go to Christopher. Hi, Christopher.
Good afternoon from New York City. Sarah, wonderful to hear you. I am a big fan, and I do have a couple of questions. What, again, do you want softball or hardball?
Christopher, you've earned the right to ask me whatever you'd like, whenever you'd like to ask them. So feel free to go for it, however you want. And by the way,
yes.
March 14th, December 14th, December 15th, I'll be in New York City.
Yep.
So I'll private message with you about that, but look forward to getting together.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. Okay. So I guess this dovetails onto your trip, and this is something that, because of the lame duck session, we're getting a lot of this nonsensical political jockeying going on here in the States. Can you go ahead and reassure folks that are maybe not familiar with our political system that the posturing of the political leaders will not affect the U.S. commitment to Ukraine?
You've said it as clear as can be. In the days following, one of my, how do I put this? One of my roles here, and has been for some time, is to write different analysis of current events happening throughout in the English-speaking world. And on November 13th, I put out a policy paper addressing this topic. And it's clear, for those of you who are in Europe, who know that the Republicans are taking over, who think that the presidential election year is coming up, it's going to be business as usual for Ukraine for the next year. Going into the presidential cycle, I'm less certain, but we'll see, a year from now. But for the next 11 and a half months, Ukraine is going to get the money they need. We're going to lobby for more money. We're going to lobby for better equipment. But the support for Ukraine, even with a Republican House majority, is still going to remain strong. The overwhelming majority of people in the House of Representatives, whether it's a D next to their name or an R for Democrat or Republican, support Ukrainian aid. And it's even stronger in the Senate. And obviously, President Biden has been a big proponent, if not aggressive enough, has been a big proponent of Ukrainians' well-being and victory in this war. And therefore, to assuage any concerns, understand that the commitment of the United States to Ukraine will in no way have its course changed over at least the next year.
Excellent. Thank you. I have a couple more, if that's okay, Charles.
Shoot, go ahead.
Okay. So on the weapons set from Western countries, their Western field set might not necessarily be a Ukrainian field set. Have you seen any adaptation issues or modification difficulties from the Ukrainian forces in accepting in Western kit into their battle plans?
Well, I can't speak from either, and I can say this, I'm not an operator of any sort of exotic Western weapons. In no way I've seen some of them in use, but I'm not an operator of them. I can say this. My fellow soldiers in the armed forces of Ukraine are some of the most adaptive and cunning individuals when it comes to winning this war. And you may have seen the report regarding how the French missile system was utilized by bringing it 10 miles offshore on a barge to then be able to hit Snake Island. So even when there's been issues of adaptability, Ukraine has found ways around them. Regarding technology, Ukraine is one of the most technologically advanced nations in the world when it comes to the workforce. There's no technology that Ukrainians can't learn to use and then utilize them to maximum efficiency and advantage. And so I think with the training programs that are taking place across Europe and I guess some in the United States, and the increase in training, it's only going to make the Ukrainian armed forces even a stronger force to be reckoned with when it comes to the weapons tech that's being sent over.
Okay, that's great. I love to hear that. I have two short ones, two small ones. How is your Ukrainian coming along? Because I struggle without even, I struggle. How's it coming along?
Did you see the tweet my last tweet that I speak Ukrainian?
No, I haven't. I've been working on a project. I'll go back and look at it.
Take a look at it. That's my answer. For those of you who would like to see if I speak Ukrainian, go to my last tweet.
Okay. And then finally, could you give us a little personal stuff? Like, what was the most difficult part about your integration into the Ukrainian forces? I shouldn't say difficult. Let me say challenging. What was for you the most challenging? I know because you've written on it fairly extensively, and the acceptance that you get, and I'm so happy about that. But for you, potentially, what was the most challenging? And then I'm going to drop down and let others have a chance. But thank you so much. We'll be in touch.
Sure. So the most challenging was to go from being a journalist that could go wherever I wanted, whenever I wanted, to be at any frontline area I wanted to be, and a very favored journalist. I mean, my favoring and positioning within Ukraine, I think, became apparent over the last 7 months prior to enlisting, 7 weeks ago. To give that up, and to give up the freedom of basically being able to tell different groups, oh, I'll do this project for you, and then I'm going to go off and cover a different thing. Now, when I'm told to do something, I have to do it. Now, when Kherson becomes liberated and I'm in the field somewhere else, there's no going to cover Kherson. And so that became very challenging to move from an almost constant frontline position, frontline storytelling, front facing. And I don't mean front facing in the sense of me doing selfies or whatever. I mean front facing in the war, where I could really go wherever I wanted, to now being a soldier, not only listening to a chain of command, but listening to, in a sense, two chains of command, because my combat medic work is separate from my work separate from my work for the ministry. And therefore, I am doing constant work now as a soldier towards victory. However, it's not as glamorous as what my reporting was, where I could just be wherever I wanted, whenever I wanted. And if I wanted to be in Bakhmut or Liman or Vovchansk or wherever I wanted to go, I got to go. And so that has been a more difficult adjustment than I had anticipated. But again, as I write all the time, actually serving and wearing the uniform and working to carry out this victory is the greatest honor. So it's just a small adjustment, but one that took the hardest getting used to.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. I have a question about your trip coming up. I mean, clearly you must have a million things, thousands of stories you would like to share and topics you would like to discuss with the leadership in Washington. How has your process been to try to distill that down and into the key messages and the items that you really want them to take up and sit up and take notice of?
Great question. So, having had a political background, as some of you may know, and understanding how DC works, for one thing, there might be one or two photo op sessions with a senator or congressperson, but in order to get the most effectiveness for Ukraine, I'm actually going to be working at the staffer level. This is a working trip. It's not a photo op trip. And so there's been a significant number of briefings set up with influential staff members in order to make certain that when the bills get written, the right people have heard from me. It's not just here, shake a hand and smile and look, I met Senator so-and-so or Representative so-and-so. Much more focus is going to be placed on actual work. This is what we need, and this is why we need it. I was originally invited over to speak about the combat medic work and some of my experiences as a journalist on the front. And that has segued slightly into talking about corruption. But those are going to be the two main pillars. What I was invited over for and what they clearly have an interest in Washington, which is where the US taxpayer dollars are going and if they're disappearing. Both issues I can speak to with some confidence and some experience. It's why I put out the op-ed that I did that was well received, talking about the corruption issue or lack thereof, Russian disinformation issue. And so that's how I plan to get it to stick, and that's how I plan to where the talking points are going to be. What my hosts offered, they wanted to hear about the combat medic work, and as meetings were getting set up with individual offices, over and over they wanted to talk about corruption. And we'll get down to it. We'll talk numbers. There's going to be a second person with me who is known to some of you. I have a feeling some of you follow this person, who's in the medical community, is very involved with the NAFO and fundraising, things like that. And I'm bringing that person with, and that person chose to join me so we could really hit the medical side hard. Not just this is on the ground, but these are the meds that we're having to pipe in. This is what we're seeing. This is what we're hearing. And it's a doctor I'm bringing with me. And so while I'll be getting, just because of the way it seems it is, while I'll be getting a lot of the publicity, you'll see this person's reports as well coming across. They're going to be spending all 4 days with me in DC. And the focus is going to be very clearly on military medical needs. And then when we answer questions about corruption, we'll answer questions about corruption, or I'll answer that, since it's a unique situation, because one of the reasons that I'm going to be able to be so aggressive in and I'll say the word lobbying, is because with the Foreign Agent Registration Act, if you're aligned or a member of a foreign military, it doesn't in any way affect you. It's a carve out in the law. So make no mistake about it, this is going to be an absolute lobbying trip on behalf of the armed forces of Ukraine, the Ukrainian government, the people of Ukraine, to the American government and American taxpayers. And I plan to utilize every bit of my political background and every bit of my ability to reach across both sides of the aisle in order to extract the best investment for the American people in the last 80 years. And that investment is the investment in Ukraine beating Russia.
Thanks a lot. It sounds very good. Well, I'm very happy to hear that it's a working trip and that you'll actually meet with some of the people who who do the labor, that write the bills, that make the phone calls, and not just on the interviews. Yeah,
I can tell you. So I'm going to be the keynote speaker at the Atlantic Council's Congressional Fellowship Dinner. It's going to be their last one with this class. It's the same one that our foreign minister spoke at two months ago. And there's going to probably be well over a dozen staffers there that have all been selected because of their efficiency within the system in Washington. I'm going to be going to the State Department to speak to some folks who are involved in the State Department with that, and multiple other staffers that I don't want to start naming. Basically, as the meetings take place, I'm sure you're going to see the tweets. It was great to speak with so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. But the Atlantic Council one, I don't mind speaking about. I'll be having private briefings with the Helsinki Commission. I will not be testifying at the Helsinki Commission, but I'll be at the upcoming hearing. I'll be at the hearing. I just will not be called to testify. However, prior to that, I'll be doing briefings for the Helsinki Commission. Again, it's not about putting Sarah Ashton in front of a microphone. It's about Sarah Ashton's been here for 9 months, and she's enlisted in the Armed Forces of Ukraine. And before that, she was a journalist on the front lines for 7.5 months in Ukraine. We need to talk to this person about what they were seeing, especially because she happens to be an American citizen. And that's basically what the trip is. And the government here trusts me enough to send me over as a representative. And the trip was first proposed or bounced around in August. We're now in December. And it went from being more of the shaking hands, smiling, and trying to do fundraising to becoming an on-the-ground, let's meet as many people as we can, push the message through, wrangle votes. There was one meeting, and again, I don't mind coming back in here after the meeting happens. There was one meeting I really wanted for geographic and geopolitical reasons, and I got it. And again, I'm looking at every meeting that we're doing as one that makes sense for both the U.S. taxpayer and the people of Ukraine. And that's the equation at play. How does my time, these 4 days in DC during a very busy lame duck session when the U.S. Congress has to pass a budget that's going to affect Ukraine greatly over the next year, how do we get the most effectiveness for both groups? And the schedule is still a work in progress, but it's packed so much that I was originally going to start it at like 6 p.m. on Tuesday night. And instead I'm going down from, I'm going to be starting my meetings at 8 a.m. on Tuesday morning. I arrive on Monday night, and I will start my meetings less than 12 hours after arriving.
great. Sounds like everything's all planned out for maximum efficiency. Let's go to Article 5 Watch, otherwise known as Bionade, but because of Twitter pox, it's got a slight change of name.
Thank you very much, and Sarah, nice to hear you again. Yeah, I have a request for you, and I have a question. But let's start with a request. I had a time where I traveled often, and I had two times, in this process where I really, had the most impressionable moments from a country or from the city where I was. It was the moments where I was there, and felt the change of the society, what is different in the culture, and then the moment when I left and when I started missing things because I had kind of a cultural shock or something like this. So I would kindly ask you in the next days you will possibly feel many things you will miss in Ukraine, and these are the good things of Ukraine. So if you have the moment, just take a note and maybe put a tweet out about what you're missing about Ukraine, and yeah, I think this is really important. The other question I have, as far as I understand it, the thing with the corruption, it's kind of an old relic from the Soviet system, how it all worked, how the people had to, yeah, be some kind of corrupt to stay alive, to go on with a normal life, to get some kind of luxury things which they usually wouldn't got. And this relic, this persisted because of the Russian influence. Would you say this is what you experienced, or how did you experience it, and how is it changing in your opinion?
Okay. I don't know how much I can say.
only as much as you want.
No. I want to say it, and okay. In order for me to join the military, I had to go through extensive testing and background checks. Extensive. I don't think the Foreign Legion has to do that, which I think is one of the issues, the International Legion. But for me to join ZSU, I had to go through extensive checks. And one of the checks was held up. And 4 different bureaus investigated me. And one of the checks was held up. And I was like, you guys credentialed me as a journalist. I went through the background checks in March, which we do. Went through the background checks in March. This is the most ridiculous thing, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, I want to speak to somebody. I mean, like, I want to find out why the heck this is taking so long. And I was told that things are so different now, that the groups that are carrying out these background checks are basically segregated from everyone else in order not to be able to be influenced or bribed or in any way tainted with corruption. So there was no way for me to go and talk to anyone because no one knew who these people were. And that was an eye-opening experience for me to show, again, just how strong the rule of law has become, just how serious people take things. And for me, it was a great answer. It was the best answer. Okay, I have to be patient. I understand why, and I would rather be patient. And everything worked out. Obviously, I'm going to the United States on behalf of AFU. But in order to preserve integrity of security services, in order to preserve integrity of state police, national police, of armed forces of Ukraine, of border guards, you literally don't have access to them, to the ones carrying out these very important duties of counterintelligence, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought that was a great example of how much things have changed here, and how little corruption really exists versus what may have been existing 10 years ago or more.
Thank you. This is what I really heard from many people, because we also saw these videos. Maybe you remember this with the police officers who wanted to take a bribe, and yeah, some freshly new mobilized people just said, "Oh no, we don't have it here anymore. These times are over." And I think society is changing, and not only in the military and in the government stance, but also in the sense that the citizens and the society at large is changing. Yeah.
Another thing that happened earlier. So there's 2 different pay structures. If you're not at the front lines, you basically, a newly enlisted soldier gets nearly 1,000 USD a month. And if you're at the front, you get considerably more, 2,500, 3,000 USD, depending on exchange rate. And then it goes up from there depending on rank. Early in the war, people were trying to bribe their way in to the military because you were getting this nice paycheck, and everything was basically a front line in Ukraine at that point. Everyone was getting the $3,000 until they realized that not only were people not accepting bribes, but that you were being like, you were going to get shipped out if you were going to get into the army. There was no basically just buying a spot on paper. And again, this war has been won. And I'm speaking in past tense because Ukraine has already won this war. This war has been won because the world that imagined the Ukraine from a decade ago does not exist. It's not rife with corruption. Nobody's selling out the values of the country. It's a battle by all men and women for liberty and freedom. And that's why the first question or your question about corruption is one that can easily be answered. That's why I can tell people from the United States in a widely read opinion piece, come over to Ukraine. We'll literally show you where the tax dollars have gone.
Do you think
Yes.
any of them are going to take you up on that offer?
I hope. And I know there's certain safety protocols that would preclude a lot of people from doing it. I hope to at least get them to Kyiv. I hope to at least get them to the warehouse areas, if not to the front. But I do hope that at least a handful contact us in the spring and say, we're getting ready to take a trip, and we're gonna call you out on it because we're coming to Ukraine. We want to see these, and we will take them there. So that's what I'm hoping. At least a handful don't just show up to go to Busha and Irpin, but they really want to get their hands dirty. And going to the front is probably too much to ask to see the weapons in action, but not going to see them in pre-deployment areas.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, seeing is believing, as I'm sure you can attest to all of us here in the room. So Stephen, I've got your hand there, but I brought up Ray. Ray, I'm not sure if you haven't raised your hand, but do you have a question for Sarah? Nope. Okay, then Stephen, over to you.
Thank you, Sarah, for coming on the space, and thank you for your service. And I was just wondering, as an American serving in Ukraine, if you what you could share with us about your experience, not just as a journalist, as we have lots of reports of that, but on the front lines, and maybe to anyone considering doing so in the future.
I never served in the United States. But what I would say, the number one thing I would say to anyone thinking about coming over and serving, unfortunately, we're not a NATO level nation yet when it comes to the military. So if you're coming over thinking that it's going to be NATO with NATO equipment and NATO structure and NATO medevac and NATO transportation, you're not necessarily going to be functional when it comes, you're not going to be functioning at the highest level maybe that you were in the US military or another NATO nation. And from everyone I speak to, that's one of the biggest frustrations. You either adapt or maybe you become somewhat of a hindrance. For me, I could, for a variety of reasons, I couldn't have come right here and served. However, I'm able to serve because I spent 7.5 months watching the war around me from the front lines and understanding that this was not a NATO army. I knew what I was getting when I signed up. I knew it. And I would almost recommend those who want to serve, maybe get involved in some aid organization first for a month and see what it really is over here. Because every single veteran I've spoken to from the US have all said the same thing, every single one. This is not what we experienced before, both in the warfare, but also the style of serving.
Thank you so much, and I'll drop down.
Thanks, Stephen. The info, hello.
Good evening. I think my question is probably for Sarah, but it may be for somebody else as well. I'll start by giving a little bit of context. About a week ago, there was a nurse called Anna, whose tweets I was picking up, who was looking for an EU hospital to take a very badly wounded veteran who was volunteering. I believe he was American. And she didn't seem to have an organized place to go to look. She was hunting around desperately. And this evening, before I came on here, I was looking at Alexander Sherpa's tweets, and he had an absolutely incredibly riveting video, which I looked at, of a desperate situation of somebody being dealt with by a load of people. And there was an instant blood sample taken for a transfusion, blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking to myself, is there already an organization, a team of people who can organize evacuation from Ukraine into European hospitals if necessary? Or is that something that is a to-do list thing? Is that something, do you know what I'm talking about?
So Anna's in the room, and I'm very familiar with the case. I don't think Anna knows this, but I was looped in on a lot of the communications. And right now there's a robust on the ground, decentralized group of volunteers who focus on evacuations. Right? Anna moved mountains. She was amazing in doing that. The reality is, it's not so much about having the people be able to get them out as finding hospitals and medical professionals that are willing to take them on when there's no health insurance, there's nothing that will pay the travel costs, there's nobody necessarily from the Ukraine side that's going to be looking at moving them out of Ukraine when the hospitals do exist here. And if all of a sudden you're picking and choosing who gets to go, then that's going to create problems on the ground with our soldiers, because how do you pick one from the other? And so there's a lot of layers that go into it, but the work that people like Anna does and the group that she's with, and obviously MriyaAid, and as I said, there's dozens of unsung heroes, but it's about getting the entire, and to refer to it as logistics chain, but to get the entire logistics chain moving when it comes to medical evac. We don't have enough. If it's logistics and the hospital is going to be, or the caregiver outside of Ukraine is going to be the end user of this person that's being shipped out, a lot of them just don't exist in bulk. How many people can we ship to German hospital? How many people can we stick to a Polish hospital, an Irish hospital, an American hospital, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And that's what we run into. We speak with specialists all the time from the Ministry of Defense, from Armed Forces of Ukraine, about how to deal with preventable deaths, how to deal with traumatic injuries, etc. And it's just about having enough spacing in foreign hospitals and enough money to do it. And the question is, how do we pick and choose which soldiers go and which don't? And so I can speak as to what happened, but regarding what Anna did with that particular soldier, and I know she had help from some people in MriyaAid and Renegade Relief Runners and some other groups. Absolutely tremendous. Absolutely tremendous. We need more people like Anna, more people like these volunteers, but most importantly, we need more dedicated medical hospital space, both within this nation. Well, I'm in Poland right now, both within Ukraine and outside of Ukraine, in order to deal with the most traumatic of injuries.
And I'm very happy that Anna has requested the speaker. Anna, please go ahead. 1 second, then I'll come back to you, info. Okay?
Okay, thanks.
Anna? Anna, I'm not sure, but you're still muted if you have anything to add. Okay, maybe she's sorting something out. Info, go ahead. Info, you can go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't have my microphone on. I beg your pardon. Am I on?
Yeah,
Hello?
loud and clear. Perfect.
Okay, I'm pushing wrong buttons here. Going back to what Sarah was saying, it had occurred to me that this is something that needs to be organized at the intergovernment level, the NATO alliance. And I hate to say this, but America is the team leader. I don't think Europe is doing quite as much as it needs to or could do, but it's Europe that needs to provide the hospitals because of proximity. And it occurs to me that there could be a line of hospitals in various countries which have like a bed reserved or 2 beds reserved, and they just do this by international agreement. Is there some way that this could be handled at the NATO level?
When it comes
Just
to
1 second. 1 second. Anna, I think we've got a hot mic.
Oh, I'm so sorry about that.
No worries.
Here, let
We'll
me.
just let Info finish her question, and then I'd like to come back to you because we were talking about this case. Thanks for coming up.
Sure.
Okay, Info.
I think
if
I've
you wanna
finished
go
with
ahead
my
and
question. If you heard me, I was basically, this is about could this not be organized at the government level? It's all very well to have volunteers, but you need things to be organized from the top down on this one.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Who would like to take that? Anna, Sarah?
before Anna jumps in to talk about her specific case, I just wanted to address again what we're running into here is that NATO is uniquely focused currently on the offensive warfare actions. And while we do have some different working groups within the allied countries that could take it on, unfortunately, due to the massive scale of casualties we have, just in the sense of 1 or 2 beds, we need to be able to scale it up, or it's going to have to remain in the hands of NGOs because we can't pick and choose which soldiers get it and which don't, and then to set it up and to do evacs, et cetera, et cetera. It's just something that we need to be able to scale it up, or else it really is not necessarily going to be the most effective measure as opposed to leaving it in the hands of volunteers.
Thank you,
lot, Sarah.
Sarah. Thanks.
So Anna, go ahead. Great to have you here.
Thank you. Yes, I still have problems with switching the mic on and off on my phone for some reason, but are you able to hear me?
Perfectly.
Okay, wonderful. So, just to echo a little bit about what Sarah was saying, she's completely right in terms of finding the means to transfer patients to accepting facilities. That really is the barrier. And the trick is doing it safely. So I would say industry standard in hospital care coordination is direct communication between the surgeons or a nurse in between on both sides. Which what I found is that on the Ukrainian side, that's absolutely no problem. I could get care conferences scheduled with their surgeons. On the Polish side, and with accepting Ukrainian hospitals, because I've transferred another British Legionnaire in the past few days as well. That's not a problem. But what the issue is that it does come down to payment and figuring out. That's what everyone gets stuck on. It's very expensive to perform surgery and rehabilitate and medicate, and nobody wants to get stuck with that bill right now. So I do think that if we, I'm not sure who needs to do the lobbying, and it needs to be it is a lot quicker and easier to transport a patient to another hospital in Europe than it would be to fly them all the way across the ocean to the United States. But I know a lot of people have asked, why don't we get them to the US? Well, because we want to do this safely. we need the medical team and the technology and the support to keep somebody alive. And a lot of these people that are injured, they're really catastrophic injuries that they're not stable patients. I don't know if that answers some of your questions.
I think that's a fair point, by the way, and good evening. I wasn't here when you started. It's a good point to have you back.
Thank you.
Very glad.
I'd like
And
to,
once again, thank you to your massive amount of I don't know how to put this best. The amount nobody in the audience can easily understand what level of dedication you have brought to this cause. It is mind-boggling. From the very brief time and short time spell I've followed this and we work together, I have to say, you are one of the most single-minded, single-purpose, and very comprehensively adaptive people I've seen. Absolutely super effective and super dedicated to the cause.
Oh, well, thank you.
Well, somebody has to say it. You can't say it.
No, I won't. Won't toot my own horn. But I think that there are other people that are very dedicated, but it's just there's so many obstacles that will get thrown in your way of transferring one injured man to a hospital. And again, safety is one of my biggest goals here. So I think something Sarah touched on is just there in terms of streamlining this. There's a lot of NGOs on the ground that are ready to pick up a man and throw them in the back of a truck and take them to a hospital, which is very kind, but it's also terrifying for me. That's one of the things that that at times I feel like I have come across to people as brash, being like, stay away from my patient. And that's why. There's the willingness of people that are like, I have a bed and I have a truck. Why can't I move this person? Well, the reason is we're not going to kill them or we're not going to injure them further if it's not like a life or death thing. A lot of times they don't need to be thrown in a truck and thrown across the border, and they can get stuck at the border without the right paperwork. So that's especially for the Legionnaires. So that's a really big factor to take into consideration with coordinating this.
I'd like to interject really fast, but on the same note, Anna, I've spent a lot of time in military hospitals in different parts of the front. Anna just mentioned traumatic injuries and catastrophic injuries. We are so used to cheering on the amazing videos, or that we might see somebody with an amputation, but we see that person with an amputation running a marathon or being in DC talking. However, to get to that point of post-amputation with a prosthetic, it's some of the most horrific images that we can see, even in a medical setting, even in a hospital setting. One of the reasons Anna brought up about throwing in the back of a truck. One of the reasons I'm going to DC, my battalion, 550 people, we have one ambulance and it's front wheel drive. I was east of Kupiansk during the time of liberation, east of Kupiansk. I have video of an ambulance getting stuck in the mud, going over a pontoon bridge. I was in a different part of Kharkiv when an ambulance was ambushed, and I was on the scene with the paramedic who was in the ambulance when it was shot up, and the ambulance driver died. These are soldiers. We don't have armored ambulances. We don't have four-wheel drive ambulances. We had a case where a Legionnaire spent 34 days in the hospital, and to be evacuated, to go 23 kilometers, and I'm not going to say where the front was or when it was, to go 23 kilometers, he had to go in 4 different vehicles, and it took 90 minutes. He spent 34 days in the hospital. I was with him the day he was released, and it was insane that the man was alive. And so when you have a nurse like Anna who understands what's going on, the first understanding is, even in a war zone, do no harm to the patient. To move someone for the sake of moving them because they're asking to leave because they're lonely since they can't speak the language isn't always the best course of action. But the best course of action is first to start off with is to get us some armored ambulances, to get us some blood transfusion kits at the front, to get us these certain things that can keep them alive and stop them from getting into that catastrophic state. And then the second is to get them stabilized, as Anna knows. And then the third is to try to get them the best medical care wherever that is in the world. But folks need to understand, and this audience knows it better than most, either through military experience or because they pay attention to the holistic aspects of the war, including the not so pretty parts. HIMARS are great, but we need armored ambulances too. We need top line medical professionals coming over to do trauma combat training, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not just let's throw a tourniquet on and know that we can keep them alive for another hour or 3 hours. So I'm so glad Anna's here to, be shedding some light on this.
I'll jump in. Hi, everyone. Sorry, I've been away as well, doing other things, family stuff and work. But, it's funny. I just jumped in now. Hi, Anna. Hi, Sarah, everyone. So without specific cases, and I didn't hear the whole conversation, look, there are benefits of moving, especially, volunteer fighters who are, working for the Ukrainian army, not to be confused with what the Russians call mercenaries, because that's just a propaganda term, to get them to offload patients into neighboring countries actually helps Ukraine a lot. So, recently, Anna and I worked with a group of people to help 2 people out in particular. And I think everyone would agree, if they knew the effort involved, that it was way too much work for just 2 people. But we're trying to find ways to make that better. And already, just in us meeting in this space, Anna now has contacts from some of my friends on a personal level who reached out to her and made something happen. So it's, in other words, Rome wasn't built in a day. We're moving as good as we can, and truthfully, just the support, everything what Sarah says, ACOL, that's also very important, and we're going to need more and more people support. After we spoke, Sarah, I spoke to a handful of neurologists in the United States, 2 of them actually. Sorry, neurosurgeon and a neurologist. I got in trouble for confusing the 2. And now that they know we have more medical staff on board, they want to help out too. Maybe an advisory role, try to get on board with you, Anna. So I was thinking of setting up a call with you and them later, because I know the great work Anna's doing. Is she's basically being an emergency trauma coordinator, but on the other side of the planet, and working with people on the ground. It's very hard, but there are agencies in the United States, for example, at the Helsinki Commission. We spoke about these topics, and I think Sarah's going to be, if you haven't gone there already, you're going there soon, right, Sarah? And Sarah, you're on your way there, no?
Correct. Sorry,
Yeah.
my microphone was
no
off.
worries.
Yeah, I have 2 separate briefing days with them, actually, or
Right,
2 separate briefing appointments.
So I'll even mention it, but that's one of the things that I spoke to them offline about, and I'd love to have, if there's some kind of coordinated, almost like intergovernmental group that we can help, especially if they're Americans who have been injured, let them be treated in other places and free up those spaces in Ukraine, and then see and bring other Ukrainians out as well. So there's a lot of work to be done. It certainly isn't perfect by any means, but a lot of people are doing great work just to get by, and even if it's one life that was just saved in 3 days of conversations, maybe Anna, we could say we helped save one guy's life for sure. No, the one that we brought to Poland.
Well, I would say at this point we've saved 3 lives. Those are the
Well, in that, yeah.
But then the trickle down effect is that opened up beds in different hospitals and moved resources to
Yes.
other Ukrainians that were brought to those military hospitals, which is what we're trying to do, is keep things moving and reallocate resources to wherever we can. Because, and healthcare workers across the world, we've become even more resilient and creative during COVID. And I think that as more doctors, nurses, anyone that can help in the effort and is savvy and understands the professional standards and sees that we can do this safely, you're going to get more and more people wanting to help with the cause.
100%. And if we can communicate that even at the Helsinki Commission, because they want to hear these stories, how we can do things to make things better, these are things that they can help direct and promote on a bipartisan level. So when it came to, if anyone wants an insight, there was about a week, in about a week's time, Anna and I were talking about at least two different people, but using very much the same mechanisms. But it did seem like a long time, did it not? Like, especially for the first case, you send me an email, we did this, now there's another hurdle, and then there's another hurdle, and then there's another hurdle. In the end, it worked out.
Right.
But there's got to be ways we can make it better, right?
Absolutely. I think direct communication and a lot of that, the time that it took for the first one was building contacts. Like I've said, I had never done it before, and couldn't find very many people that had. And I can understand why, just because it was one of the most frustrating ordeals of my life. But then with the next one that we did, it was easier. It was much less people involved, and got him over there much quicker. So, and he's on his way to, I think, possibly getting another surgery from a orthopedic surgeon, and then he'll be getting physical therapy. So, yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, it's amazing. And you know what? That's the power, again, good power of social media. This is something we've done. So like working in the back scenes on these type of things and some other stuff that we're doing has been really, really helpful. And some of us have had to drop off a bit because it takes a lot of effort on the other end. And we're glad we've, also made great new friends everywhere, and there's a bunch of people in Poland down there that we won't mention that have really stepped up, haven't they, and really helped out a lot of people. Ukrainians, Americans, Canadians, a really good, really strong group of Poles dialed in, and I'm glad that we were able to network them.
Oh, absolutely. Those they were just the kindest, most personable and helpful people, that some of the best I've ever been connected with. So absolutely grateful for those polls.
No worries. Yeah, these are the same guy. There's this one guy, I'm not going to name him, but very influential and affluent family. And I'd asked him once to if he could help John Spencer get to the Ukrainian border. And this is a guy with not a lot of time on his hands. And instead of hiring a vehicle, he picked them up and drove them himself in his Lamborghini or something like that. No, it was like he didn't have to. And I said, "What are you doing?" And I called. He said, "No, it's my pleasure. I want to help." And this is someone who doesn't need any accolades, doesn't want to be named. A very kind benefactor in Poland, and that same person has a bazillion contacts all the way up to the Minister of Health in Poland. So it goes to show you that if you try hard enough, you find the ways to do it, right? So, and I'm glad we were able to do that. And I'm glad Sarah's here too. Sarah, you're going to be here more often, right? We're doing this is it a road trip? You know what I mean, with you across the states to Helsinki Commission in Washington.
We were talking about this a little bit before you came in, discussing what to expect, what my goals and aims are, and really how this is not just for photo ops, but it's truly a working trip to bring in much needed ancillary military aid, specifically medical aid, which dovetails perfectly with what you and Anna and Axel were talking about tonight, and also to refute this long-standing campaign of Russian disinformation about corruption in Ukraine, and to make certain that the lawmakers in the U.S. understand that the tax dollars being used, Ukraine are being excellent stewards of, and that the American voters and American taxpayers have to appreciate the fact that aid to Ukraine is the greatest foreign investment the United States has made in the last 80 years. And those are going to be the dual pillars of the trip. And I think the folks we're going to be speaking to are going to appreciate it and understand it, and we'll move on and hopefully see great results from it.
I certainly hope so as well. Thank you very much. I know that you were limited on time, Sarah. How are we doing? How much more time do you have? Because I've got two more hands.
Let's do these final two questions and we'll wrap it up then.
Actually, before you go on, a lot of messages I got on when I popped in asking if the talk with Sarah and Anna here is going to be on Spotify. So I don't know. That's kind of a subtle hint to the people in the back. If you can get it on Spotify, that'd be great. Go ahead. Sorry.
Actually, I don't mind with Anna if you guys want to just have a sit down with me and Anna talking about medical issues. I mean, that is what was the impetus of the trip to Washington. And I do believe, I don't know if Anna's worked with the person that's coming with me, but I'm going with a doctor who's very familiar with the situation here in Ukraine, who works here in Ukraine, is going to be with me at some of these events. And
so why don't we schedule that though, Sarah? Let's
let's
make it an
do it.
actual time. Yeah,
That's what
okay, so
ask Anna, and we'll try to schedule
let's do it. I'll set up a signal chat with the three of us, but for this conversation that we just had, we've got people asking if it's going to be on Spotify. So that's kind of my subtle hint to the people who do that on our team. If they can just spool it up and get it on, that'd be great. And I'm seeing some hands up, so I think that's going to happen. So there's your answer to the questioners. We're going to try to get this conversation up on Spotify. Sorry, go ahead, and then Sarah has a couple of questions. I'll sit back, or comments, sorry.
Thanks a lot. Go ahead, the info, and then we'll go to Carlos.
Thanks. I'll be really, really quick. Going back to what you were saying about ambulances, Sarah, you and Anna may already know about this particular fund, but I picked it up on Twitter again, good old Twitter. And there's a retired American NASA astronaut who set up a fund specifically to get money to buy replacement ambulances. Its name is Scott Kelly, I believe. Do you know about that?
I do know about it, and I do know that Mr. Kelly was here meeting with the president. And I believe he's routing it through either Come Back Alive or United 24. And so what's good about donating money to those, we're getting feedback from something.
Info, do me a favor, mute your microphone, and Anna, while Sarah's speaking, so we don't have the feedback. Thank you.
So
go ahead, Sarah. Let's try again.
He very sure. So Mr. Kelly was meeting with President Zelensky and I believe the donations are routed through either Come Back Alive or United 24. Either one of those are very helpful, and it truly is one of the most overlooked parts of this war is the medical evac side. We're not calling in medevac choppers. We understand that we're taking hours plus sometimes to move people, but to even have the basic equipment and for people to start focusing on that, like Mr. Kelly is truly a blessing. Because again, and I will repeat this over and over and over again, every soldier's life saved is a life closer to victory.
Very well said, Sarah. Carlos, go ahead.
Yeah, Sarah, I'm glad you actually just mentioned the last thing you were talking about. I think there's kind of sometimes a disconnect between casualty evacuation and medical evacuation. And kind of, again, a medical patient is a medical patient, whether they're the enemy who's been wounded. So maybe you could speak to how the Russians are also being treated by the Ukrainians, because I know Charles can identify with this. We evacuated all wounded. We took care of them at the same level of care. And I think a lot of Americans have a disconnect because they're used to the roll facilities, a roll 2 versus a roll 3, using the medical helicopters for medevac. And I know that luxury, unfortunately, isn't there. So if you could just kind of, maybe to cage people, talk about the difference. And I know Anna just kind of mentioned it too, just being able to throw somebody in a truck and get them off of a battlefield, which is, the casualty evacuation piece. And, when you're a soldier, part of in the back of your mind is, if I go down and I'm wounded, how am I going to be treated? How am I going to be evacuated? It's such an important and critical piece of being able to fight with confidence. But yeah, if you could speak a little more to that piece of it, I'd appreciate it.
I remember, it's a great question. And I remember this so well, and I have it on video. Again, Kupiansk, again during active fighting. In Kupiansk, there is a blown out bridge. There's two blown out bridges, but there's a main bridge that was next to where the Russians had set up their occupation government, their illegally occupied government building. And you could only take a four-wheeler across it. You couldn't take vehicles across it. And we were coming back from doing something. And in front of me, maybe 75 meters, were two of our guys walking side by side, very gingerly, very gently, with this decrepit figure. And I saw the ambulance waiting right where it could be brought up. It wasn't an ambulance like we'd imagine, but it was a van fitted out with some medical supplies. It was basically a self-made ambulance. It was there, and I saw the medics awaiting this person. And they were walking so slow because this figure was so frail, and it was just so walking so gingerly. And I nearly catch up to them. And then I realized the person's eyes were taped over, and that this was a Russian prisoner of war. And we were delivering a Russian prisoner of war to the medical company for medical evacuation, medical transport. And that's when it really made me understand that we are not them, because we do treat all patients the same. And even our rank and file soldiers understand that everybody's a human being, as much as we want to believe them to be orcs. Once they're captured, they're human beings. Once they've stopped fighting, they're human beings again. And it's our job as soldiers to treat them with dignity, and it's our jobs as medics to protect them from and try to save them. And so that was my experience. That was my first experience. That was my experience. I ended up picking up most of it on video once I realized who it was, what it was. And ultimately, we can be soldiers and need to kill them. But once we've captured them, we have to be medics and take care of them. And if they're the patient in front of us, they get the space. If they're the only patient there, they're going to get the ambulance ride to a safe location to get stabilized, etc. And so, yes, I can speak to it when it comes to medical transport of patients. And we're not fighting over helicopter space because we don't have them. I think we have 2, maybe 3 medevac choppers for the entire country.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate you kind of just reminding people about that piece of it, and yet another thing that distinguishes the Ukrainian armed forces from the Russians. And probably 30% of my time as a JTAC was medical evacuation and getting people off the battlefield. It's not just about just like you talked about it, the humanity piece of it. So thank you very much. We'll be lobbying in DC at the same time for different reasons, but both related to the war. So maybe I'll see you there. Good luck.
Thank you so much. And I don't know if you're in DC right now, but safe travels to DC.
I'm in my camper van driving there as we speak. So thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Sarah, for stopping by the space today. And I'm sure, I'm privileged to say from everybody here at the MriyaReport, all of the listeners that we have, everybody at Maria Aid, we wish you all the best in Washington D.C. And we certainly hope that the people that you meet with have open ears to the message that you are bringing them. I'm I'm so hopeful that you will achieve the outcome that we so desperately need. Um, Before you leave this evening, is there anything you'd like to say? Anything you'd like to share?
I'm going to be. I want to say two things. The first is going to be a slight plug. I'm bringing over some things to be auctioned. That is just going to be. It's not going to be a formal auction. I talked a little bit with Yehuda about it, and some people saw me mention it. I have a couple of helmets and some captured Russian gear. Everything's geolocated that I'm going to be fundraising directly for AFU on. And I didn't want to put anything up until I had it in the United States, right? Because I didn't want to be stopped at customs and have them taken or something at any point. But once I do, any and all interest offers, etc., is going to be, I would love for you guys to take part. It would be all things that I've captured myself and that I was at the battles for myself, all around Kharkiv Oblast. So that's what's going to be going on. So keep an eye open for it. And it's going to be super fast. If something seems like interesting, probably a 24-hour bid with shipping within like 36 hours, just because I'm not bringing it back to Ukraine with me. And we're just trying to raise the money to cover my expenses on the trip, because we've paid for this out of pocket. And then the second thing I want to say is, you guys have been broadcasting. MriyaAid's been, and MriyaReport's been broadcasting for basically 24 hours a day now, in some form. We'll call it in some form, for a long time. I don't want to get into all the nitpicking between the names of it, but the core group of people here have been paying attention to this war for not just 9 months, but for 8 years. However, for the past 9 months, you guys have been the backbone, very much, of the information war against Russia, and pushing back against the disinformation that the Russians put out there. And you all are true heroes. I can't begin to express how much appreciation I have from my viewpoint as somebody who, has been in the thick of it along with y'all. And just keep it up, because this winter is going to be a very brutal winter. It's not going to be pretty. It's not pretty, and it's not going to get pretty. However, we are winning. We're going to continue to win. And in many respects, we've already won. And so don't let the lies and disinformation get you down. Keep on fighting back for us, and keep on doing the work both in front and behind the scenes, like Axel and Anna and Yehuda and so many others have done regarding, the people. And use your experiences to save lives and to win a war. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Yes, I can certainly echo that, having been someone who's relatively new to the space. Now, the core team, one of them is on the speaker panel now, how much they mean to all of us in this space, and how much they've done. Thank you very much.
Good luck with your lobbying, and please, come back with some good stuff.
For sure. And I'll be doing my updates throughout the week. Hopefully, maybe on some nights I can jump back in here and give you guys updates. Eastern time will be a little bit easier to talk to everybody, since I'll be actually on the same time zone as probably 60 or 70% of the people. And we'll just go from there. So I'll talk to everyone soon. Have a great night.
Thanks, Sarah. Bye-bye. And of course, a reminder to all of the listeners, if you're not already following Sarah on Twitter, please check out her account and her fantastic new sweatshirt and her mastery of the Ukrainian language. I think it's something that resonates with all of us. So with that, maybe just back to various topics, but you're listening to the MriyaReport, as Sarah mentioned, 24/7 since the start of the war. Information, analysis, discussion regarding everything Ukraine and the genocide in Ukraine. A range of experts. We have a fantastic panel at the moment. I'm very happy to to be a part of this panel with so many experts and knowledgeable people on all topics. If you have any questions or anything you would like to discuss regarding the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, just click the request button in the bottom left, and we will work to bring you up. First of all, then I guess I'd like to say good evening, Mockers. How are you?
Hello there. I'm very good, thank you. I've got 3 pages of notes, so we should be fine.
You always do. What, as you've been starting this evening, what has caught your eye that you would like to look at first?
Well, just staying on the subject of medical professionals, the medic Tyra, who was captured as a prisoner of war and returned, she was awarded the Vincent Prize, which she immediately dedicated to the writer Vakilenko, who was killed by the invaders during this last 9 months. So she's an amazing, humble, and extremely strong lady. She really is inspiring with everything that she's doing. She absolutely wants to keep the focus on what she can do to help others.
That's a fantastic story. I think, you know, as we've heard from Sarah, I think one of the things that we talk a lot in this space about the, you know, the big guns and the big booms, but you know, the healing and the treating of the wounded, to not only save their lives but hopefully make sure that they do not suffer lifelong disabilities if they don't need to, is extremely important. So it's great that those people are being recognized.
I'm just being told in the background that we still have lots of space issues. People are sending me screenshots of blank screens with no buttons, and they're not able to do anything at all. I think we're going to keep it running for a little bit longer and see how it goes. But just to give you a warning that we may have to do a restart at some point to try and get things fixed. Hooray for Twitter glitches, hey?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we've been encountering bugs within Twitter Spaces for, I guess, about the last 18 hours or so. There are a range of bugs you may have, depending on whether you're on Android or on iPhone. Co-hosts and speakers have had them several times. What we can recommend is to, first of all, try restarting the application, try clearing the cache on your phone, try restarting your phone, and in some cases, reinstalling the application has helped people. In many cases, you will find that the behavior is that you will seek to log into the space or you seek to enter the space and you will not see anyone. Sometimes this situation resolves itself after several minutes, sometimes a while, and then it seems to work normally. If you are in the space listening and you do not see a request button in the bottom left-hand corner, or it's grayed out, that's not me, that's not Mockers, that's not the host account, we're not doing anything with that, that's just Twitter. But it does seem to be getting somewhat better over the course of the day, but maybe that's just on my end. But those are the range of things that you can do, clearing the cache on your phone, up to and restarting your phone seem to help quite well. But also, if we also this morning, we had quite a few people listening in on the MriyaReport.org website. So I'd just like to highlight that. You can also listen to the Maria Report on our website. Unfortunately, though, then you cannot interact. If you have any questions that you'd like to discuss, you can always DM them to me or to Mockers, and we will bring them up.
Or at least we'll try to.
Exactly. Sometimes we depends on what the questions are and how many we're getting at one time. So I've just brought up Nevada. Hello, Nevada. Did you have a topic for us?
Yeah, I posted. I sent you a thread in your DM that I wanted you to post to the nest for the people regarding the Twitter glitches. I believe it to be a memory leak on the Twitter app, probably from their last update. And exactly what you said is exactly what they need to do, is basically close out all the apps on your phone, restart your phone, or turn it off and turn it back on, and then only open the Twitter app. What happens with the memory leak is if you have like a bunch of apps open on your phone, and you have Twitter open, Spaces specifically, and say you click on a prior space recording, or you click on a YouTube video or anything of that sort, it may then you'll start experiencing the issues that we've been seeing. So in order to fix that, you got to clear the cache on your phone. The fastest, easiest way to do that is to shut your phone down and turn it back on, which sets it back to 0 again, and then you'll be able to do. But it's going to repeatedly happen until Twitter fixes the memory leak, and they'll have to do probably another update to fix that. But it is a problem, so I've already given instructions to many people already on how to fix it, and it's fixed theirs. Albeit temporary, they'll go a few hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, and then of course the memory will be taken up on their phone again. They'll have to repeat the steps, but at least we have some sort of a workaround to get us through. That's all I had to say.
Well, thank you very much. And yeah, at least we can sort of get around it for the moment. We'll just have to see how it goes. If it gets much worse, we might have to do a restart, but we'll keep on trying, because that's what we do. Bernardo, you've come up.
Yeah, I checked it out, but yeah, restarted the phone, opened nothing, not even connected on an iPhone SE. So I would discard this memory leak theory. Have to be something else maybe, but yeah, I actually have an old Android, which I haven't updated like a few months, and you see Twitter is working absolutely fine. So for everyone who has a technicality possibilities, yeah, just maybe you can set up some kind of emulator and on your PC, and yeah, get some get some older Android with a older Twitter package if it's somewhere out there. But yeah, that may be workaround. But I think we have to wait and we have to see. But yeah, if you can connect, it's always great. And if you only can connect via the computer, just listen to us. It's amazing too. Marcus, did we have some booms?
Funny that you asked that. The mayor of Melitopol, Ivan Fedorov, stated that this last week, 20 military bases of one kind or another were destroyed in the sort of the Zaporizhia area, Melitopol, Polohi, Mykolivka, and Vesely. Maybe I might have said those correctly. In those areas, anyway, they have taken out 20 military bases, which just goes to show that I think, like Chuck Farrow was saying the other night, every time they gather, to get together, the minute they get a big enough group of people together, suddenly precision fire arrives, and that's not a bad thing right now. Not a bad thing. considering all the situation of what they're doing. I do have another thing which is a potential boom. Is that there was reports of air defense systems active over the Russian city of Rostov. And don't know, that came just after reports of right, I'm not going to say this right, Ukrobonoprom, maybe, was moving to final testing of a new attack drone with a warhead of 75 kilograms. It might be out of range, actually, Rostov, thinking about it, the flight range of 1,000 kilometers. But even so, it was rather funny to put those two things together.
Yeah, this was something Colby brought up. Discussed it a little bit with CJ. You'll find it's the second tweet in the nest. So this is the tweet from Colby regarding that potential air defense activation in Rostov, which, as you mentioned, Mockers, was quite far away. But of course, we've seen several attacks. We've seen different booms across Russian territory and Russian-occupied Crimea, where it's kind of been like, well, how did they get that? But looks like Nick maybe want to address this. Nick?
Rostov is less than 1,000 kilometers from Ukraine, right?
Yes, it is. I mean, I guess it would depend on which part of Ukraine, but it's less than 1,000. Yeah.
I mean, I doubt if it would be. I doubt if you do your final testing. Right. I suspect the two things are not related, but I'm just checking. I'm learning more and more about the geography of the region, and I'm pretty sure Rostov is less than 1,000 kilometers away.
And I believe
That is horrific, by the way, just letting you know that.
Well, I believe the Russian explanation also for it was a supersonic flight test. Was their explanation of this to the people? If I'm not mistaken, what Colby said, of course. You can look at the tweet in the nest, the second one, and you can see the trail. That is certainly not an airplane.
Oh, it does make me laugh what they chuck at the wall. Ah, never mind.
So I've got one thing that's come out today, Mockers, that I think may be interesting, and it's right up my alley, which is defensive fortifications. There was a really great thread. I'll put it in the nest as soon as I can find it here again. But really good. There's been a lot of good intelligence, and the guys who, of course, monitor all of these satellite photos. Really looking at these defensive fortifications all around Ukraine. But there was a really fantastic analysis by Skill. I'm going to go ahead and put it into the nest here. It's kind of a long thread, but really a deep dive into the defensive fortification lines that the Russians have been building east of Bakhmut. Now, it starts with a topographical map of the area, and this is something we talked about a while back. Excuse me, not Bakhmut. I'm talking about east of Svatove Kremino. My bad. And this was something we talked about a while back. Kind of why this line of defense, why the Russians were so desperate to hold Svatove. After the big gains that when they lost Kupiansk and Izium and Liman and all of that, why did they need to have some kind of line there? And the reason is because this line, you'll see that there are this terrain is dominated by sort of low ridges and river valleys running north-south, which would naturally kind of give you one line after the other. But Svatove was the first valley that they were able to actually try to hold. In fact, they were trying desperately to hold the ridge to the west of Svatove, which is where the 66 highway runs up to Kupiansk. And they really needed to hold that. And this is where we've been basically for the last month, as the Ukrainians have been pushing them off of that ridge down into the valley. Now, looking at the terrain as we move further east, the next large river valley to the east is Starobilsk. Starobilsk is where the rail line runs, north-south. Now, currently, Starobilsk is outside of 155 artillery range. The Ukrainians can hit it with HIMARS, and they have hit it with HIMARS, but it is outside of 155 range. So if when the Russians get pushed into that valley, that's not a tenable position. They can't stay in the valley. They would need to retreat back to the next ridge line. And that's where the Russians have been frantically trying to build field fortifications. We saw a large convoy, huge convoy of wood, of these dragon's teeth, and other engineering assets in Misky, which is between Starobilsk and Svatove, about a week ago. And the Russians have been really frantically trying to dig in anti-tank dishes and other kinds of fortifications in that area before the ground freezes and it becomes much more difficult. So the Russians have sort of been racing against time against Ukrainian advances, especially just north of Crimea, where they've cut the P-66, and they're basically looking right down into the valley, if they're not already in the valley, north of Crimea. And they've been racing against the weather. They're starting to run out of time on both. And what's interesting about this, the satellite imagery that Skill has seen here is they haven't been able to build any fortifications in the defense in depth. So they have built a linear line of fortifications, but this is just one big long line. It's a long line. It's 85 kilometers or something. It's not short. It's a pretty big engineering effort, but it's not particularly effective because they don't have any defense in depth. There are pros and cons to having this kinds of thing, but in general, if the Ukrainians have any kind of maneuver forces, which we know they do have some mechanized infantry and armor in this area, a defense in depth is typically the way that you would want to approach it. So, so we have actually a pretty good look at what the Russians are trying to accomplish, knowing that they cannot hold that river valley, the Krasno River Valley there, hold Svatove and Crimea. And basically, if they can push the Russians off that next trench, the one just east of Svatove, this opens up a lot of problems for the Russians. One, Starobilsk is then in 155 artillery range, meaning they don't have to use HIMARS on very, very specific targets. Instead, they can use much more artillery saturation, and they don't have to be as selective in their targeting. Two, the southern portion of that ridge is overlooking Rubizhne and that whole area. So Lysychansk and all of that is then very much in a very difficult position for the Russians to try to hold. So that's why the Russians have been so desperate to hold on to Svatove and Crimea. But we know that the force structure there, this is mostly conscripts. The only way that they're trying to hold the Ukrainians back is with their artillery firepower. They've been in a race against time to try to build some kind of field fortifications. We now know what those look like. Not especially effective. But in general, it's good that we have this much information, but there are certainly things that are going to play out in this area over the coming days. The ground has frozen, mostly frozen. It is very cold at this time. We're going to have a full moon coming up. A lot of things are pointing in the direction of solid offensive operation from the Ukrainians. Sorry, that was a really long update, but I just found this so interesting.
I actually read through that myself earlier today, and I found that quite interesting, pointing out specifically the areas where they've done like the basics, but they haven't actually put in any areas where they could like protect their forces. You know, it's a line, but it's not a strong one.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the advantage of having something like this from, if you're looking at it from the Russian point of view, the advantage of having this is you don't really have any gaps, right? So you've got the whole thing covered, or at least observed, right? So I mean, if you can make that single line strong enough, then okay. But actually, the much better way of doing this kind of thing is the way that doctrine, even Soviet doctrine back in Cold War, and of course NATO doctrine through the Cold War, when everybody was planning for large maneuver forces, armored forces, was a level of defense in depth. They have actually done things like that in Zaporizhia and in southern Kherson Oblast. But I suspect at this point they simply didn't have the time, the resources, and the coordination to be able to do anything like that. Because we've been fighting over Svatove for a better part of a month now. And they really only got serious about building this line about a week and a half ago.
And they don't seem to understand that we can see absolutely everything they're doing. That's what mystifies me. You know, you seem to have an awful lot of things that they're doing that they don't seem to realize that they're observed all the time.
Yeah, I don't know whether that would change the decision making much. I mean, it's something that they know. They certainly know. I mean, they talk about it on Russian television all the time, how they don't have the satellite capability, and that, you know, they rail against NATO, and they really need to do this, and so they know that they have this weakness. But I mean, in the end, I mean, some field fortification, some position is better than no position whatsoever. So I don't actually think it's changing necessarily what they're going to do, because it is actually, you know, digging in, trying to build a fallback position is actually what the Russians, it's the correct thing to do. But I raise it here. It's actually quite an engineering feat that they have done. They dedicated a lot of resources to it. I would just say that it's kind of too little, too late at this point.
Absolutely. Guys, we're going to try something really quite technical now. We're going to try and swap co-hosts. So, Charles, thank you so much for the time and effort you put in today, considering you were pretty much the only person with a working phone at the time.
No problem. So I'll go ahead and step down, and yeah, thanks a lot.
And feel free to come back up and chat to me if you want to, because, you know, I love you. Right, everybody, woman in charge again. And I'm just going to welcome Anda, because it looks like she's got a working phone. Hello, Anda.
Hello, Makars. Yes, it works because it's a new phone, because I got so pissed on Twitter. So, yeah, hopefully this one works. I got here. This is a good thing. We will see tomorrow morning. I wanted to test if at least I can see you and the speakers and everyone else as a speaker. And if it works, because for yes, the other morning and during the day it was not an option. So yeah, and I wanted to ask if you managed to discuss about the HIMARS. There is a piece of news which came into our news about the United States Army, who awarded Lockheed Martin 431 million, $41 million dollars contract to produce M142 HIMARS. I'm trying to read, and I have messages, and yeah, I'm doing my best. So I was wondering if you discussed about this, because I just managed to set things up and to come up.
Yes, we did indeed talk about this large package, indeed, to purchase or certainly move forward with the production of many HIMARS. And yeah, the Lockheed Martin, I believe, had to wait for quite some time for the signing of the document, of which there is no explanation as to why that was delayed. However, it's done now, and thankfully that's getting done. Do you have some more information about it that you want to bring us?
Not really. If you discussed about this, this is the only thing that they mention. That they start arriving into Ukraine, and there are already in Ukraine about 20 units, and about the fact that basically the US side considered it's a good thing to resupply, right? And they're talking about some. There is another thing, but there were two other thoughts. One, the fact that there were some reports which were all unconfirmed from Russian side, that they have captured HIMARS, and up until now the Ukrainian side said, this is all, I'm sorry, a nasty word. This didn't happen. We have all the HIMARS here, and there is also a question if they will sustain low temperatures, right? If they would have problems, if the temperature drops below -10 or -20 in Ukraine. So at this point, they only mention this as an option, as a problem, potential problem, not actual problem, and they don't give any other details. So the article is not quite the most comprehensive, but I hope we will have someone on the panel who can give us more detailed information. I see Nick just popped his hand up, so maybe he can help us with info on this one.
Yeah, I do know, I'll just come in and add this. I do know that we asked CJ about the cold issue, and after laughing for some time, he did say that those particular things were tested quite strenuously at cold temperatures, and he assured us that the cold temperatures should not be an issue. But go ahead, Nick.
Anna, you're talking about the Eurasian Times article on HIMARS.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've read a few of the articles in that outlet, and some people have said, oh, it's pro-Russian propaganda. I don't think it is. It just seems to me to be extremely incompetent journalism. And when you read their articles, each individual sentence looks quite interesting, and then you look for, like you say, you look for evidence. And so they say, it has been claimed that, and it has been suggested that, and according to some sources this, and you go, yeah, but what does that really mean? And they don't provide any evidence for almost any of their points. So in particular, I mean, when the US military orders a weapon system, they tend to specify that it should work when it's a little bit cold or a little bit hot. I remember when I used to work with civilian computer equipment, and civilian computer equipment is typically specified to work in temperatures up to plus 30 Celsius and down to 0, and then from 0 up to 1,500 meters altitude or something. It doesn't really affect a computer too much if it's a little bit higher. And then there was the occasion you'd get stuff, and it was called mil-spec components, and that was designed to work down to minus 25 and plus 40. And so the idea that the HIMARS is going to stop working because it's minus 6 is ridiculous. If you read that article, it suggests the one thing that I found vaguely interesting was it said, okay, in the winter you've got less top cover. But in any case, when I don't think the HIMARS fires and then moves under a nearby, forest cover. They fire and they drive a long way back to base. So the whole thing would make sense if you didn't think about it too hard. And so it's fairly typical of a lot of modern journalism, really. It's just things that appear to make sense on the surface just long enough to get you to click the next article, because that's all that's required. But there's no thoroughness, there's no evidence, there's no actual understanding of the physics or the logistics or any of those other things behind it. So yeah, the conclusion I'm coming to about that particular outlet is it's not that it's pro anything, it's just absolutely terrible. And if I read an article in which they're saying the Russians are having trouble, you look at it and it makes the arguments have about the same degree of terrible validity. So read beyond that, read the article twice with a critical eye, and you'll see that they haven't actually said anything. And it turns out that actually happens in rather more respectable media sometimes too. They hire cheap freelance people whose actual job title is content provider to write stuff, and the only requirement is that you keep reading long enough to notice the advertisements, which is rather disappointing. So yes, I don't for a moment imagine that HIMARS is going to stop working because it's -7.
Thank you. I was actually laughing here because you described it so well, the article. It is fairly long, and it has a lot of it has a lot of sentences which don't make any sense if you put them together, and I didn't even deem relevant the fact that they mention, as you said, the foliage. So yeah, the only question remained was if this is a valid idea, the fact that it's going to be cold, which it's good that it isn't. So
It's a bit like
you.
if you'd given a bunch of students who didn't know much about the situation, and you'd given them an exercise and say, think up 6 reasons why a weapon system might not work in the winter. And so they've come up with those, but it's like, on closer examination, you know, the students come up with those after 30 seconds of thinking, and these points all look very reasonable for students thinking for 30 seconds. But actually, when you kind of take into account the fact that, you know, the people using the systems are not stupid, and the people who design them to work in various conditions, you realize that these are not, you know, actually major problems. I can imagine the absence of top cover does change certain bits of logic of how certain systems would operate, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily the same problem when you're dealing with the M142. So yes, it's an entertaining read for someone in a hurry, but that's why we're here also, I think, is to give a little bit of context to say, well, yeah, that might sound attractive, but A, B, C. And, you know, people who understand the military situation a million times better than me can do that, but also sometimes just, you know, old-fashioned common sense, and you wouldn't do it that way if that was the problem. And, you know, the people doing this are not stupid. So yeah, I actually, one thing I appreciate about that outlet, the Eurasian Times, is they cover a big variety of topics, and they cover some topics that I hadn't otherwise thought about the war, and I quite enjoyed it from that point of view, even if sometimes you find yourself going, okay, what is wrong with their arguments here? But they do have some interesting kind of genuine facts that I didn't know. And assuming them to be genuine facts, but I think most of them are. I don't think they're in the business of lying. So it's worth a glance occasionally, I think. Just don't take when they start inferring things, don't take that too serious.
Yeah, I think that answers the question about, yeah, sometimes journalists are just writing things in order to get you to read to the bottom. I see we've got some hands up. Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on what Nick was talking about. I mean, I've actually been through one of my businesses on the contracting side of you know, picking up people on Upwork or ODesk, as I think it was called then. You know, for copyright people, for content providers to simply provide kind of generic content around certain topics, and I've seen it actually a lot, of course, since the Russians started this most recent invasion. Things about the defense industry, things about the war. It's often a good tip just to check the byline first. A lot of the freelance copywriters won't necessarily have even a name there. It'll just be like editorial staff or something like that. In a lot of cases, it's not wrong. It's just it's necessarily wrong. It's often just a freelancer who's taken an hour to do a Google search and to summarize it and to generate content, because there's pressure to continually post.
Quite right. There is pressure to sell and keep selling, isn't there? Otherwise, the world doesn't go around, obviously. Go ahead, George.
Yeah, I was on what Nick was saying. So I guess I'm sorry, but I guess I missed it. Probably for the better. I guess somebody put out an article that HIMARS is not going to work at certain temperatures when it gets cold. Is that the crux of the argument there, Nick?
It was a general article in this news outlet about, you know, ongoing problems with HIMARS and the temperature was. It was, you know, problems with HIMARS in the winter, and you know, including the fact that you need special fuel and lubricants, which I think just means you need to put a dash of petrol in your diesel. But they didn't even specify that. You know, they made out like there might be problems, and it's like, well, there might, but you know, if they read the handy dandy manual that I presume comes with every HIMARS launcher, then probably there won't be problems. So, you know, you've got to create this permanent sense of, oh my God, something's about to happen, because I mean, we to be fair, we feel it on this space occasionally when there's a busy week on the battlefield. We talk about that. When it's a lot quieter, or at least when the news from the battlefield is a lot quieter, we tell ourselves stories here. And sometimes I think we're a little over enthusiastic at telling ourselves stories. So, the human need for stories is very understandable. It isn't going to go away, particularly in times of tension.
Yes.
My own, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, but they do understand that, United States isn't Florida and Texas, that we have areas called, Minnesota and Alaska. And, when we can test cold gear in Alaska. And we also have an area, called Death Valley, where it can get over 150 and 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Did they miss that?
Well, you and I know that. You and I know that, but the readers of these publications neither know nor are they interested. That's the reality we have to deal with. Part of the difficulty of being an intelligent, educated, or informed person, and in fact, one of the better skills that intelligent, educated, and informed persons can learn is to understand the extent to which large numbers of people, and sufficiently large numbers of people to make a difference, are not informed, intelligent, or educated, and to deal with that reality. That large numbers of your population are not interested in anything beyond the end of their street, and that's not even a criticism. It's just a description of the state of a large part of humanity, and we have to live in that world, and those people get to vote. So very, very, very basic stuff like that is not taken into account in these calculations. My own run-in with content providers is ongoing. So about 3 to 4 years ago, I was deeply involved in the debunking of an American scientist called Brian Wansink, who you may not know his name, but you will have heard things like, if you go to the supermarket when you're hungry, you'll buy more junk food. Or if you eat your dinner off a smaller plate, you'll consume fewer calories. And this was all bullshit. It was mostly fake research. And but the guy had a couple of best-selling books, and we demonstrated that it was all bullshit, and he had to resign from an Ivy League university. But one of the standing jokes between me and my Twitter followers is I have a little Google alert for whenever some content provider publishes an article featuring this guy's research, which is utterly discredited. And about once every 2 weeks, I'll pop up, and I always write the same tweet. I say, hi, at outlet at content provider. I read this article, link to bullshit article. Have you seen this? And then a link to the article where the guy has been shown to and has resigned in disgrace. And it's always the same picture that comes up. And it's become a sort of absolute running gag between me and some of my Twitter followers of, oh, right, it's that one again. And that's how I learned about this whole business of content provision, because in the majority of cases, you're reading outlets that you've never even heard of, and then articles by people with 50 followers. And it's just this constant churn. These aren't even publications that people subscribe to. The job is to get it out there and hope that accidental Google hits, occasional Facebook posts will generate just enough tweets to pay the content provider $8 for the 300 words they wrote. And it's this sort of soup at the bottom of the pile of information that has come to utterly dominate everything out there. And it's killed print journalism, but there is an absolutely huge market for it, which is why this stuff keeps getting produced. And it's a real challenge. It's a real challenge for those of us who value complexity and truth about difficult subjects, is to understand without and to not become kind of cynical or arrogant about it, but to understand that the vast majority of people could not give a flying one about most of what we know and most of that level of knowledge. And we were all, yeah, sorry.
No, I was going to say, Nick, the bad thing about it is it gets picked up by other news, quote unquote, news media sources and gets disseminated out even further. And sometimes even like what we call reputable news services pick some of these things up and start spreading them. And then you have like, you know, you're going to have some like really crappy outcomes because, we said the people that elect officials, yeah, some of them, yeah, it is scary who can actually participate in the election, but that's neither here nor there. We're in a democracy, but also some of the people that are elected as our officials do not have the capability to know when they're reading utter BS, and that's the problem for our society with this stuff. Because I work in the medical field, and we've had to deal with certain crackpot ideas that have been spread by dubious figures, and then gets caught on by the regular media, and then spreads like wildfire. And then I've got my congressmen and stuff like that asking like if these things are legit. That's the scary part.
Well, yeah, I mean, next you'll be telling me the Jewish space laser isn't real. But the extra kicker that I would add is sometimes the so-called legitimate scientists are also generating fake stuff. And I remember during COVID, you're saying to people, "Hey, listen to the scientists. Just not those scientists, not those fake scientists over there who are taking money off various, shadowy political groups." And so my current focus in I don't get paid, but being a retired person, but in my professional life, is working on bad stuff coming out of actual established science. Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult.
Yeah, it's very difficult because I work in a healthcare field, and yeah, it's gotten really bad about in the last 10, 15 years. I'm starting to question, who the hell is doing some of the peer reviewing in some of these publications, because it's the standard has, for me, has gone down.
My DMs are open. Send me a message. I'll send you a few links.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you.
Just on the subject of a story that may or may not be absolute tosh, but a lot of publications picked it up and decided to run with it. It was the Putin falling down the stairs and pooping himself story. That one ran with a lot of different publications, and all of them I found were very amusing.
We, of course, also need comedy. So I kind of imagine it's not true, but it would be funny if it were. If it turned out to be true, that would be a super bonus.
Well, exactly. We like to think that things like that are true, especially if they're amusing. Now, I have some subjects, and as nobody's got the hand up, I'm going to start with them, just so you know. We were all aware today that a KA-52 Alligator class helicopter was shot down. It has also been announced that 2 Su-25 aircraft were also shot down today. I don't know the locations. I just heard the announcement, so happy for that. And the Czech Republic has announced that they have started training. Now, this is not just your basic training. This is specialised training in mechanised specialised forces and SF special forces training. So it looks like they're doing additional training in the Czech Republic and amongst many other places. I think that's brilliant. I'm going to give you this one as well. I've got good news things today. Good news. So from Monday, December the 5th, 4 regions in Ukraine will go back to scheduled blackouts rather than you get some electricity when we have it sort of situation. So the scheduled blackouts will be in the Kyiv region, Dnipro, Odessa and Donetsk. And obviously they've put a caveat on that if things don't go to plan, there may or may not be changes to that schedule. But it sounds to me as though they're getting stability back into their electrical grid, which can only be fabulous news. And I don't know if anybody wants to talk about that. No? Right, okay. I'll carry on. My NAFO fellas will enjoy these next 2. There is an exhibition in a Berlin museum showing how Ukraine supporters have been fighting Russian propaganda with memes and derision, and it is entirely devoted to NAFO memes, and they're actually exhibiting it as a piece of history, and I just think that is amazing. I love that. And on the same sort of vein, the founder of St. Javelin has been awarded a medal for significant contribution to equipment and strengthening Ukraine's defence capabilities, and of course all the active volunteering, which is big handout to St. Javelin. I think that's like just awesome. Excellent people doing excellent things and also making excellent tops. I'm going to now introduce you all to Professor Matthew Light, my esteemed co-host. Welcome, Matthew.
Hello, thank you very much. It's great to be with you.
It's great to have finally got you up as co-host.
Yes, it's been some time and I apologize for the technical problems. I just saw your invitation. I'm not quite sure why it didn't come up until just now, but glad that I was able to join you.
Twitter is twittering. It does it from time to time, and it would appear it's a problem for everyone, so no apologies necessary.
I was wondering if there was any interest in perhaps returning to a topic that was alluded to a little earlier, which is the reports about Putin's health. And I was thinking as you were speaking about that this is a subject that comes up intermittently or occasionally in coverage of the invasion of Ukraine. Sometimes the argument is that Putin is aware that he's nearing the end of his lifespan and is trying to cement his legacy or make good his legacy by violently reintegrating Ukraine into Russia. But other people have suggested that all these updates or alleged updates on Putin's medical problems are not only unreliable, but perhaps actually meant to deliberate misinformation. And I'm curious what you and other what listeners think about that.
Well, I only know that if I'd been diagnosed with all those things for that period of time, don't think I'd still be alive now. there's been an awful lot of speculation about his health for such a long time, and he you know, he's still walking around causing problems. So I can't say that I believe them all, put it that way.
Yes, I think that's also approximately my view of the matter. It seems like it's wisest just not to give too much credence to these stories or to try to work them too much into our understanding of the situation. But I do wonder whether other people might have different views, or in particular whether they think that there's some way in which Russia has something to gain from putting these stories out there, because to me they seem on their face to be, if anything, kind of negative for the Russian government.
And it looks like you've got something to say on this, so go ahead.
Yes. So, my honest opinion, right? They only do this in order to gain something, right? They have a very well-oiled machine of propaganda. They have been using propaganda for decades now. So, and they've been lying for for every other subject regarding any other subject that was brought up, not only during this war, but in general, the last years, we haven't seen anything that was true or genuine coming from Kremlin or from Russian state media. So everything it's staged, it has a purpose, it has a target. Before this war, if you remember, there were lots of articles and pictures, and what's more annoying, full-fledged documentaries on Putin, which portray him as, well, sort of a Superman, right? He is riding a horse with no shirt on, right? He's going diving. He is doing all sorts of things which actually didn't need to be advertised in any way. And I don't remember when, if ever, have we seen a Western politician doing stuff like that. So that particular narrative was aimed to internal consumption mostly, to portray him as a strong, young or young enough leader to weakness being one of the biggest things that it was obviously he didn't want to look, didn't want to portray, right? So this is what we have seen before this war. After this war, from time to time, we have had this. I'm sorry. Matthew, do you want to?
Sorry, that was an accident. Please continue.
All right. So after the invasion in February, what I've noticed is that he changed, and the media, what came from Russia, changed the topic and the tone, and there were no longer, I was expecting something like bathing in a a frozen lake, and stuff like that, right? And that didn't come. He was more conservative presented. He was presented in Kremlin in his setting, right? With very rich surrounding. The room was always very posh, and from time to time we have these kind of news that he's ill, that he is going to die, or I have a problem, with this, because I don't believe either of them. I don't believe the first ones, and I don't believe these ones. And I also remember that he had some doubles, and this was not new, to have a double, to have someone else who looks fairly, from a distance, looks just like you, right? And there were some speculations at some point that he was in a hospital and gonna die, and the guy who showed up was not him, and stuff like that. So I think this is another kind of propaganda, another way of how should I say this? He's trying to gain sympathy, right? The army is not doing well. He cannot go and say, look, the army is doing excellent, and I am celebrating by, I don't know, going hunting bears someplace. So he is kind of asking for poor him, right? He is so ill and he's still fighting, something like that. At least this is my take. I might be wrong, but this is my personal take or interpretation of what's happening right now.
Well, that's very sensible. I think you make a good point that there is quite a contrast between this kind of leak or information and the earlier presentation of Putin as someone who was very athletic and healthy. Raising the question of whether it's a change in sort of strategy, or whether it's information that is coming out of his administration involuntarily. In other words, a kind of leak, or it's just fabricated. I suppose I'm a little reluctant to for the reasons you mentioned, to kind of speculate too much about his actual health. I do wonder, and I'm curious whether other people have an opinion on this, whether in any sense it matters. I mean, in other words, do people think that those in decision-making positions in Western capitals or in Kiev are actually following this issue closely, and it has some bearing on anything that they might do or not do?
Charles has his hand up here, so I'm going to let Charles go. Go for Charles.
Thanks, Smokers. Yeah, to the last question. I mean, I think our Western leaders paying attention to this. Does it matter? I mean, I think we could certainly agree that understanding your adversary is something everybody tries to do. To come back to the idea, but I mean, does it matter for me personally? No, I would say I don't care mostly about his health. But what's interesting about these reports that I notice, living here in Germany and primarily consuming European media, is that these reports really don't appear here. The only time I see them and I see the fascination with, does he have Parkinson's? Does he have cancer? Is he mentally unstable? It's always coming from British or American sources. And so when I read my newspaper or I watch my evening news, these things simply don't come up in Germany. And I took a look around France and things I didn't know. It doesn't seem to be a topic here. So I think it may actually be a reflection more of the culture of the consumer of the media rather than something that's being driven from somewhere else.
Thanks. Nick, go ahead.
I think this is one of those situations where our intelligence services will have the right information and they're not going to tell us what they know because, first of all, they don't want the Russians to know what they know, and secondly, because that's just kind of not the kind of thing you talk about. So yes, I'm pretty sure that the Americans will have a very good idea of his state of health, and that will be factored into some of their decisions, and perhaps it may explain some of their decisions that we don't necessarily understand, along with the hundreds of other things that American, British, and other Western intelligence agencies know about the situation, and which they're not going to tell us in order not to reveal what they know. So I think it just has to go down under the mysteries, of the of the war that one has in any such situation. I'm sure we'd all love to know, and maybe if those intelligence agencies came on here and made us pinky promise not to tell anybody beyond this space, we'd all hang on their every word. I don't think that's realistic. So yeah, we can only speculate, and we can only guess. Does Putin care about his legacy? We all have our own relationship with our own death. Some politicians care deeply about their legacy. I think Putin's egotism works in a different way, frankly. I don't think we can know, and I don't think we can know. We can speculate about what it might change about Western attitudes if we did know, and then try and see whether we observe that. But there's always 100 explanations for any given decision. So, it's part of the delight of being here on a quiet night and trying to read the tea leaves. But I don't think we can do anything. Sensible. But yes, I think I think the Americans probably know with a high degree of certainty whether or not Putin has, let's say, whether or not Putin has a life-threatening, has a terminal illness. I think that's the first thing you need to know about your dictatorial opponent, because apart from anything else, they're going to be wargaming, and they will have been wargaming multiple succession plans involving the death of Putin, whether he keels over from cancer or very poopy pants or a bullet to the head from a visit from the GRU one day. But I don't think it's always going to be speculation, I think. But I think I like to think that the people who matter have a pretty good handle on this.
Yeah, and Axel has been unable to speak for himself, unfortunately, but he did send me a message, and his opinion is, and I think it is the correct opinion, that the issue of his health portrayal is used to infer that he may actually act irrationally because he's got nothing to lose, therefore making him the big bad doom. But in this context, it really doesn't matter what his health situation is. It's all about what's actually going on. And so, in the grand scheme of things, we don't care what his health situation is. We're just looking at the facts and what's happening on the ground, and that's what we can deal with. And yeah, you're absolutely right. It's pure speculation. And it's funny to think of that you might have fallen down the stairs, but you know, there are worse things that could happen, such as acute lead poisoning, and the sooner the better, as far as I'm concerned. I note we have CJ on the panel. CJ. Oh, I was about to say, CJ, can you hear us? And he immediately disappeared. So I must have jinxed him. I'm so sorry. Sorry, I had to stop and laugh. Oh dear. Yeah. Apologies, CJ. Anda, you've got your hand up, darling. Go ahead.
Yeah, actually, CJ was laughing, and he also tried to enter the space and realized he is already there. So Twitter is twittering today like mad. So yeah, we are trying to stay on top, and for everyone here, we are here, and we struggle right now to be here 24/7. Charles had put a lot of hours today, and then Mockers had came up, and we have now Matthew. We are very grateful for everything you did, and thankful. And if you be so kind as to help us by tweeting and retweeting the space to get the word out, we are here. It will be awesome. And also, don't forget to donate to MriyaAid. We support them, and what they do, they send non-lethal aid to Ukraine, drones and others. And yeah, we are here to talk about Ukraine. I will drop to get some sleep, and I will be here in the morning. And thank you very much. Thank you, Motkers and Matthew and Charles, Nick, everyone. I have Björna de Axel Luis, so nobody's left out today. And to all our listeners, thank you very much, and have a good one.
You too. Good night, Anda. And I have an announcement. Break, break, break. I know, it's exciting. The announcement is that in 2 minutes, we're going to restart the space because we're having a mare, an absolute mare. So hopefully that will help. So